All right, what's going on, boys and girls? So this particular video, someone sent to me. If you guys are gonna send these videos, can you at least make it either to related reaction videos or similar content, not a microphone review or a music review or reaction? Be much appreciated. So anyway, this particular person sent me a link to this particular person, Tech with Tim. He has a video called My Thoughts on Linux, the Pros and Cons. So I guess we'll roll into it and see how much either I want to bang my head against a wall or whatnot. So let's roll into it.
Hello everybody and welcome back. So today I'm making a very highly requested video on Linux. I'm going to be discussing the pros and cons of Linux and why I use it on my laptop as my main operating system and then in a dual boot environment on my PC. Now personally, I'm non-expert at Linux. I've been using it for about 4 months. I have it on my laptop and then obviously here in dual boot, and that's about my experience with Linux. I'm, not an expert. I'm using Ubuntu with the Genome desktop, just, the built-in standard stuff, and I feel like that's where a lot of you guys are as well. You have some basic understanding of Linux, you could switch to it and you could use it, but there's something holding you back or you're not sure whether or not you should make the change and go all Linux. Now personally, I have every operating system, so I have a good idea and good reference point to be able to compare these different things. But anyways, let's get into this video, discuss the pros and cons of Linux and why or why I wouldn't recommend switching to that operating system. Now before we get too far into the video, I need to show you guys these awesome wallets. So this is a wallet I got sent from Xker Wallet, I think. There's a link in the description to the website where you can have a look at it, but it's an awesome card holder wallet. So you can see when I press the button down here, it actually ejects the cards. I believe it can hold 5 up top like this, and then there's some flaps in here for some more cards and some cash, and another flap at the back that can hold another card. Now these actually come with an optional GPS tracker as well, but definitely check them out. There's a link in the description, and again, a thank you for sending these over for free. Alright, so let's get started with the pros. Now the first and most important thing with Linux, the reason that I use it on my laptop as the main operating and the only operating system on there, is because of the consistency and the reliability. Now I'm comparing this to an operating system like Windows, whereas many times on my Windows laptop before it had Ubuntu on it, when I opened it up, I would just want to throw it against the wall because I'd see that dreaded screen where it said it was updating. This is something that I absolutely cannot deal with. I do not want to open up my computer and not be able to use it for half an hour because it has to do an update that I didn't agree to. And I absolutely don't want to be rushing for a power source in the middle of the night when I open my laptop because it says updating, don't power off, and God only knows what's going to happen when this shuts off when it's in the middle of updating. With Linux, this does not happen. You can choose when you want to update, how you want to update, and you don't ever have to update at all. Now, I know in Windows you can go and tweak these settings, but I feel like it doesn't matter what you do on that operating system, it will somehow find a way to ruin your day someday in the future when it needs to update. And it's done that for me so many times, and that's one of the main reasons I love Ubuntu, because I know that's not going to happen, and I know that if I need to open my computer and get something done, I'm not going to have to worry, and that's going to be fine. The next thing that I love about Ubuntu and...
Okay, so I have no problems with those points. The Windows update mechanism for Windows 10 is, quite frankly, god-awful garbage. They've gotten better about it as far as like scheduling times and that kind of stuff. I got no complaints as far as like why you... what your take is on that. I got no issues. The Linux world's bigger than Ubuntu, but like I can't knock somebody for having a solid reason why they just want to use a fucking computer. And waiting a half an hour for updates is annoying as shit. It's like, oh hey, I have an hour to play a video game. Why that I haven't touched in a month, and then you go to play said video game and you get slapped with a 10 gig download for an update or some shit. It's annoying. So I got no complaints there.
Linux in particular is security. Now I believe with every Linux distribution, at least with Ubuntu for sure, I've tested that on my main computer and my laptop, when you install this operating system, it gives you the option to encrypt encrypt your disk drive. Now, essentially what that means is if someone gets access to your drive, even if they plug it into a different computer and try to run, a different operating system on something like that, they won't be able to without knowing your master encryption key. Now, essentially what that is some key that actually unlocks the drive to make it readable. So this means that if I plug in my Ubuntu hard drive into a new computer, I can't immediately read it and start looking at all of the stuff on it without having that key. So that's actually huge if you're someone that's into cybersecurity and you're someone that cares about the physical, safety of your devices. Because what a lot of people don't know is if I have access to your computer, especially this one right here, and you have just say a standard Windows drive on that, if I take that out and I just plug that into a new SATA slot on my computer and I log in, I can actually read your entire drive if it's not encrypted. So that's a big deal. There's also a lot of other security features.
What most people don't also realize is if you have a lovely, no, I don't have any right here at the moment. If you have a lovely USB drive and you have a Linux live USB boot and you have a Windows system that's not encrypted, you can read all the files and all the jazz on there. Just saying.
Features built into the operating system that do with network security and a lot of other important things. And when it comes to security, Ubuntu is kind of just the winner. It's obviously not 100%. There's things that you can do to hack it and to get in. But compared to an operating system like Windows or like Mac, it's much, much more secure and just makes you feel a lot safer when you're actually using it. Now, the next massive advantage of Linux.
Now, I do want to state that feeling safe and actually understanding how safe you are two very, very different things. You are never going to prevent something from happening. Your job is just to make it a pain in the ass to get to that, or make that as minimal as possible. There's always going to be a workaround or something as far as when it comes to any type of security. There's always some way to crack something or break something or go into something. That doesn't matter how many things you put up in front. That anybody who's in IT security will tell you that your job is to minimize the risk. You will never mitigate the risk. So it boils down to the kind of the same thing as far as another portion of security. The problem that exists currently and will continue to will be between whatever interface and the chair, or the screen and the chair, as it were, i.e. people.
Linux is performance. Now, this is particularly important if you're running on hardware that's outdated or just slower hardware in general. Linux is a much faster, more efficient, and lighter weight operating system for almost every single distribution that you have. Now, even with my distribution, which is Ubuntu, which has the full GNOME desktop, which would be one of the heavier weight versions of Linux, it runs extremely fast on my laptop, which is like a mid-level laptop that would take typically, let's say, 45 seconds to boot up in Windows. Now, with Ubuntu on it, it loads in probably 10 to 15 seconds, and everything just happens much faster. Even programming, and I know this sounds kind of ridiculous, when I'm running some specific programming scripts, I notice things happen faster in Ubuntu and in Linux. When I'm trying to open a program, when I'm trying to navigate somewhere, even just look things up on the web, sometimes it runs faster in Linux. The kind of rule of thumb is that Linux is just faster and more efficient, and specifically when you're working with outdated hardware or hardware that isn't really capable of running a full Windows install like efficiently, Linux is a much better choice. So Windows, I'm sure you guys know, running on an old computer just doesn't work very well. It's super slow. It takes 3-4 minutes to even get into the screen where you can see the Windows loading happening. With Ubuntu, that just doesn't happen. It's so much faster, and Linux is just way better when it comes to performance. Now, the next...
Okay, so let's talk performance. It all depends. I've said this before in prior videos. So first off, I have no reason to really be yelling or screaming at Homeboy here. He's giving some some solid reasons for his reason why he views Linux as a pro and con, and that's fine. Like I don't get mad at that kind of stuff. I'm not usually that guy as far as pronunciations because I butcher shit all the time. So I know you call it genome. It's gnome. I honestly don't care how you pronounce it, but some jackass, I'm assuming, in your comments is going to say it. So I'm just being the nice guy about it. And it's gnome. It's a hard G. Just think the little annoying friggin' things that sit in a lawn, the little gnomes. Okay, so, but as far as everything else, like, yeah, it's lightweight, but it depends kind of on the distro. It depends on hardware. It depends on, there's a lot of things. So, like, I can't just simply say that Windows is garbage on a lower level system. It's not great on some systems that are lower level. The HP Streams are one of those systems. Some of the tablets that came out, that are like 2 gigs of RAM and 32 gigs of storage. Not a great experience for Windows 10. So yes and no. And that's all I can really say to that.
Next Pro is going to be specific to programmers, and this is just programming on Linux. There's nothing really specific I can say about this other than it's just way nicer, way easier, and generally faster to get things done when you're working in Linux. When it comes to installing complicated modules and packages, a lot of the times when you need to do that on Windows, they involve multiple steps. There's graphical installers you got to install, you got to extract this, you got to go here, install this here, move that there. It's just usually way easier on Linux. Now, I'm sure there's some exceptions here when it comes to specific programming languages and whatnot, but in general, and with all of the different programming languages that I've used so far, they've all worked better and just been easier and less stressful to use on Linux. And I now pretty much do all my programming, which is pretty heavy programming too, quite a bit of it, on Linux because it's just way easier. The terminal is so much nicer for running different commands. Just moving and navigating around things using the terminal commands are way easier on Linux, and it's just way less of a headache. So definitely, if you're doing a lot of heavy programming, I would recommend at least dual booting a Linux on your machine and using the using Linux for your programming and then Windows or Mac for whatever else you need to do.
ADT's been asking you to watch the big game for the past few weeks because, fun fact, a recent study suggests.
So those have kind of been my 4 pros. And
mid-roll commercials, really. Like I get like half an hour videos having mid-rolls, but like an 11-minute video, really?
Things I noticed immediately about Linux that I loved. I'm sure there's obviously hundreds, thousands of more pros and reasons why you would want to use it, but for me, those are the things that stood out and are the most important to me. So that's why I mentioned them. But now let's go ahead and get into the cons of Linux, as there is actually quite a few of those as well. Alright, so the first con of Linux, and this might seem like it's going to contradict one of the points I made earlier in the pros, is that there's a lot of bugs and a lot of things that don't really work. Now, this is just because Linux is an open source operating system. It's free. It does not have nearly the massive teams that Windows and Mac OS have working on them. And because of that, there is a lot of issues with the operating system. Now, for me, I've had this operating system crash a few times on me, or at least crash specific applications that are third-party apps. And when I initially installed this on my computer, trying to get a lot of my accessories like my microphone and my, speaker and even my keyboard to work on it properly was just a nightmare. It took a really long time. The drivers for those were not automatically installed, whereas with Windows they are automatically installed, and with Mac they typically are as well. And I had to go through some pretty technical and difficult steps to actually get them working. So that's something to consider. A lot of accessories and a lot of the things that are built for computers, just to plug in USB or whatever it is, are not designed to work with Linux and are not designed to work with Ubuntu. So trying to get them working sometimes can be difficult, and I've heard stories of specific accessories just completely not working at all with the computer. So that was a big deal for me. On my laptop, I didn't have sound the entire first day that I had the laptop because I couldn't figure out how to get it to work. I also didn't have Wi-Fi. The Wi-Fi adapter was not initially installed on there. So if that's your only computer, or that's your only tech device, how are you going to look up how to solve that, right? So just some things like that. There's a lot of bugs, a lot of things that just go wrong, and sometimes you're going to run into some pretty difficult technical issues with your accessories and even with software, which is my next point.
Okay, so let's talk developers. Let's just take one distro, Debian, however you want to pronounce it. I don't really care. The thing Ubuntu is based off from. We'll use Ubuntu because that's what you're using. That particular distro has over 1,000 developers working on it. Just point in reference. The kernel, the kernel in and of itself has over 3,000. I think it was like 3,300 last count for active developers. Frame of reference. Just say it. These aren't going to be, the $1 trillion companies where they can just throw programmers at shit. This isn't a 120,000 employee company and they can throw 120,000 people at a particular, project if they want. But in the scope of that, those are guys that are they're either from companies that are working on Linux, they're from drive-by contributions, so the bugs thing, every OS has bugs. Every OS has programs that crash. When you uninstall a program and then or reinstall a program, and then oh hey look, DLL hell much. Try to let's talk certain Steam games. Drakensong is one of them that comes right to mind. Can't play it on Windows without doing a bunch of hack gimmicky reg crap. So every program, every OS is going to have bugs. I could sit here and yell and scream. You're not giving enough specific information to say what was wrong, what wasn't wrong with your hardware, so I can't. There's no point in me yelling and screaming. I could sit here and do what I normally do, but what's the point? This video is not going to be the typical video where I yell and scream because he's giving an impression, which is fine, but he's giving a very clearly stated, these are my opinions. He's not trying to pass off his experience as fact. It's just his take, and I'm okay with that. Now, there are other people who try to pass opinion off as fact, and that's where I'm not okay. So bugs, that's a bit of a stretch to me. And if you actually look at the grand scheme of things, the contribution, it's a fairly significant contribution. As far as hardware support, Linux has the best hardware support out of the box. I'm just saying that's what it is. As far as in the kernel itself, Windows and Mac obviously are going to have more support from the third-party developer, like Logitech and all the other companies. This is where, like with Mac OS, you have to shop around a little bit more for certain things. It's annoying, but you kind of have to. In fairness, though, I've had 5 different mics that I've used in the last month. This particular one is the Marantz NPM 2000U. I used the Toner Q9, which is down there. I've used Fifine's wireless USB mics, lapel mics, another USB mic. If they conform to a universal plug-and-play standard, they're probably going to work on Linux. My capture card that I have over here, plug and play on Linux. It's doing some research. It's annoying, but generically, you're going to get your stuff to work. As far as the Wi-Fi not working, if it's Broadcom, it probably required drivers, which means you probably had to, unfortunately, hopefully have an Ethernet jack available. That's just what it is. That's more of that's a can't ship out of the box kind of thing. Not much the distro makers can do about that.
So there's a lot of software that you probably want to use that you can't use on Linux. That's just because it's not supported. This operating system is not meant for, your average everyday user. The person who just wants to go on their computer and write in Microsoft Word and use Excel. Guess what? You can't get that on Linux. Or if you can, I don't know how and I haven't done so. And the built-in tools that come with Linux, which are supposed to kind of substitute those, they have like Libre, Office Writer, and Libre Spreadsheet or something like that, in my opinion, are really not comparable to the kind of Microsoft products. I'm sure obviously you can use Google Docs, you can use Google Sheets, all of that. But still, it's just something to consider that there's a lot of software, and specifically video editing software as well, that you can't use on this operating system and that just don't work well. And that's kind of the two major cons that I noticed with this operating system, is that a lot of what I wanted to do I couldn't actually do on this, or if I could, it was just a pain and it wasn't nearly as clean as it was on Windows, and that's why I keep dual boot on this machine. Now, other than that, there's nothing too drastic that I would say.
I'm gonna let the rest of this video ride out before I really say anything. I'll get to the video editors. I'll get to programs and that kind of stuff in a second.
About Ubuntu that I don't like. I will say that there is some actually screen resolution errors. So I have two monitors here, and trying to get these monitors to be different resolutions so that they don't look zoomed on one and zoomed on the other, because I have a 4K monitor and a 1080p monitor, it doesn't work. There's no way. I've looked it up. I can't even get it to work properly after going through all these guides to get this one to go 1080p and to get this one to go 4K and to have no scaling issues whatsoever. What I want to do is just zoom one screen and unzoom the other one, and I can't do that. And there's a lot of things like that where it's just these different accessories and compatibility things that just don't work on the system, and there's nothing you can really do to fix that. Now, obviously, there's tons of customizabilities. I'm sure there's probably something I've done wrong, but that's just something to notice here, right? There's some things you want to do that you can't do, and even if you can do them, they're pretty difficult to get done. And if you're just an average user that doesn't understand all these technical pseudo commands and lingo and jargon and all of that, it's going to be very difficult to figure out how to do it. It's another thing. There is absolutely no support for this operating system when it comes to like calling in and asking someone for help, or having someone even come to your house, and fix it. Whereas something like Mac is
Buy a machine from Dell. Official support. Buy a machine from System 76. Official support. Pop! OS is officially supported by System 76. Dell officially supports Ubuntu. Now, if I remember correctly, you were at one point, I haven't looked at this in a long time, so I could be wrong, more than likely am, that Ubuntu used to offer technical support on, like, as a paid option for, like, individuals. I'm not sure if they still do, but just something to consider. All right, you got about 30 seconds left on this video, so I'm just going to let the rest of this ride before I say anything else.
Something like Windows, you can bring that to the store and someone will fix that for you. Now, that's because this is an open source and free operating system. One of the advantages of it also becomes a massive disadvantage as well. So anyways, that has kind of been my opinion on Ubuntu. Now, I understand a lot of this is subjective. It's for my use case, and that's what I tried to make clear at the beginning of this video. If there's anything in here that you guys disagree with or that you'd like to elaborate on, please do leave a comment down below. And a last and final plug before we leave, go and follow me on Instagram, go and follow me on Twitter. And with that being said, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, leave a like, subscribe, and I will see you in
All right, so I know most people are probably sitting here expecting me to yell and scream and call this guy a bunch of mean names that I normally would. But again, the difference is in his approach. He's making it clear this is just his experience, his opinion. He's not passing it off as fact. So I'm okay with that. So let's talk applications for a second, shall we? The short version. You do not go to iOS expecting Android apps to work. I didn't go to BlackBerry 10 expecting all my Android apps to work, even though I can run Android apps. I don't go to Mac OS expecting my Windows apps to work. I don't expect to run iMovie in Windows. So why would you have the same expectation on a different platform? That's a user expectation problem. Now, as far as the programs, and I will tell anybody this, if you are looking to switch, doesn't matter the application, operating system, whatever, you have to be willing and understand that there is going to be massive differences between everything from workflow to thought process, and you have to approach it with an open mind. What do I mean by that? So you're in Windows. Okay. If you're in the Adobe sphere and that's your bread and butter, Linux probably isn't going to be for you because you're too ingrained in the Adobe sphere. Now, if you're willing to jump out of the Adobe sphere, then let's talk about it. Outside the Adobe sphere, you got DaVinci Resolve for Linux. You have Lightworks for Linux. Ask Jason Evangelo, who does Linux for Everyone, about how much he loves Lightworks. The Irishman was just actually got done editing on Lightworks, and that's available on Linux. Kdenlive, Flowblade, Shotcut, which is available on Windows. Kdenlive, I believe, is available on Windows as well. Cinelira, Lives, Pativi. There are a ton of video editors. Just like in Windows, the only difference, you go in, do I try Power Director or do I try Cyberlink or Corel, or do I try Premiere Pro or Premiere Elements? Consumer mindset, all those options are the same deal. It's about how you approach it. Unfortunately, you're kind of approaching it in the wrong mindset. And if you're tied to the Adobe sphere, that's totally understandable. It's a standard. I get it. But use the alternatives that are available on Windows if they're available on, then when you transition to Linux, that transition is a lot easier because at the end of the day, you're not caring about the underlying OS. You're caring about the applications. And the quickest way to not care about the OS at all is just have the applications available. So that's just kind of my take. I'm not going to yell. I'm not going to scream. I think Homie's got some good points. He's got some points I disagree with. A lot of it's perspective. So that's just kind of my take. Sorry, there's no yelling and screaming on this one. I like people who want to engage in a discussion, but make it clear that this is just their experience and their opinion, but they don't try passing that opinion as fact. So you guys know what to do. I will talk to you later. Indie Gala, Patreon, all that jazz down below. I'll catch you on the flip. Peace.